The government considers raising the duty on tobacco products. Democratic Party members pledging to join Occupy Central heckled by protesters. And the Philippine president says he has no plans to offer a formal apology.
Good evening. The government is considering raising the duty on tobacco products to try to reduce the number of smokers in Hong Kong. And it's also thinking about launching anti-smoking campaigns at kindergartens. Vicky Kung reports.
There's mixed reaction towards a possible tobacco tax increase in Hong Kong.
I think anything that's going to encourage people to smoke less and pollute the air less it's got my support, definitely.
I guess I was smoking less.
With the Financial Secretary's budget speech coming up later this month, the Hong Kong Council on Smoking and Health is calling on the government to double tobacco tax.
The reason for that is for the past 2 years there has been no tax raise for tobacco, and the cost of the tobacco sales has been absorbed by smokers already.
But some cigarette vendors are against the proposal. They believe raising tobacco tax will worsen the illicit cigarette problem rather than deter people from smoking. This vendor estimates that 7 out of 10 of his customers have turned to illicit cigarettes after the government implemented a 40% tax increase in 2011. He says some of his regular customers have even asked him if he sells illicit cigarettes. The Hong Kong United Against Illicit Tobacco, an association funded by tobacco companies, also believes the sale of such cigarettes is out of control.
When more than 1/3 of our smokers is buying illicit cigarettes already, to me it makes sense that we have to contain the problem before we consider raising taxes and just making the problem bigger.
A pack of cigarettes is priced at $50 in Hong Kong. $34 go to taxes. The Coalition of Hong Kong Newspaper and Magazine Merchants believes that 1/3 of street stalls that sell cigarettes will close down if the government increases cigarette tax to price the product at about $80 per pack. There are currently a record low of 640,000 smokers in the city, but the government reported that it has detected an increase in tobacco consumption among women and primary 4 to 6 school kids.
I think it is important to start young, in terms of, smoking prevention, as well as promoting the idea of a smoke-free family.
Chan says the government is looking into various ways to try to further reduce the number of smokers. These include taxation and kindergarten education programs. Vicky Kong, TVB News.
Members of the Democratic Party today pledged to join the Occupy Central movement in the event of Hong Kong people being denied true universal suffrage in the 2017 chief executive election. But they were harassed by protesters who accused the party of betraying Hong Kong when it agreed to concessions in the 2010 political reform package. Evelina Lung has more details.
Around 30 Democratic Party members attended an oath-taking ceremony at Statue Square in Central this afternoon. They pledged that they will join the Occupy Central movement if the government fails to put forward an acceptable political reform proposal. However, the ceremony quickly turned into a rowdy shouting match. The party members were confronted by supporters of Occupy Central who accused them of selling out Hong Kong for supporting the government's reform package back in 2010. Chairwoman of the Democratic Party, Emily Lau, got hit on the head during the scuffles.
There are people with different views, that's fine. But I think there is a line that many Hong Kong people do not want to cross, and that is to respect people with opposing views the right to express themselves. And if people try to pressurize us, to intimidate us, well, I tell you, they have failed. The Democratic Party and me, Emily Lau, will not be bulldozed into silence.
Some of the party members, including Albert Ho, continued to be heckled by the protesters after the ceremony was over.
The opponents of the Democratic Party chased Albert Ho 2 blocks down the street past this major intersection in Central before dispersing peacefully.
Ho met with reporters afterwards, expressing disappointment over the authorities' failure to take any action against the protesters.
I understand that the police may be reluctant to intervene because they tend to think that, well, this is just, different groups of people having some deep conflict in their political views. But this is much more than that. This is an open act of harassment, intimidation, and interfering with the activities of other people.
He stressed today's incident will not stop the party from fighting for universal suffrage in Hong Kong. Evelyn Lang, TVB News.
Philippine President Benigno Aquino says he does not plan to offer a formal apology to Hong Kong over the deadly 2010 Manila hostage crisis. The first rounds of sanctions imposed by the SAR against the Philippines took effect today. Tony Sabine has more.
The 14-day visa-free arrangement for holders of Philippine diplomatic and official passports has been suspended, effective today. That represents the first phase of sanctions imposed by the SAR over the 2010 Manila bus hostage tragedy that claimed the lives of 8 Hong Kong people. In making the announcement last week, Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying cited the failure by the Philippine government to offer a formal apology. Philippine President Benigno Aquino made his first public response to the sanctions in an interview with the New York Times. Aquino said he had no plans to apologize because doing that could create a legal liability. According to the newspaper, he also said China had not paid compensation to the families of Filipinos who have died in episodes there in the past. Manila City Councillor Bernardito Ang, who has been involved in the negotiations with Hong Kong on behalf of the city, said the SAR should not have imposed sanctions before the talks draw to a close. Still, Ang stressed the discussion should continue. Hong Kong legislator Regina Ip, a former Secretary for Security, said there's room for the Hong Kong government to extend the sanctions against the Philippines.
The Philippine president's reaction is to be expected because I understand the government was close to a deal, but the Philippine authorities backtracked at the last minute, refusing to offer any form of apology. So it's unlikely that they would change their mind in the near future.
Lawmaker James To, who's been helping the survivors and victims of the families, said the Hong Kong government should be given more time to decide whether the sanctions should be extended. Tony Sabine, TVB News.
The Indonesian domestic helper who was allegedly subjected to abuse in Hong Kong is said to be almost fully recovered from her injuries. Erwiana has been discharged from the Central Java Hospital. She had been receiving treatment there since she returned to Indonesia January 9th. Reports say she has gained some weight and is now able to stand up and walk on her own. Before leaving the hospital, Erwiana held a press conference to thank everyone for their concern. Her former employer in Hong Kong faces charges of wounding, assault and intimidation, among others. Earlier, Erwiana said she was willing to return to Hong Kong to testify. Head of the International Olympics Committee says politics have no place at the Olympics. The remark comes amid criticism of the Sochi Winter Games from several corners as organizers scramble to make final preparations for the event. James Aiken reports.
After 4 months, the Olympic torch relay leaves for its final destination. Less than 200 kilometers away in Sochi, even the fireworks are being rehearsed for the big night. The expected cost of preparing for the games has soared to more than $50 billion, 4 times the original estimate. But despite the price tag, organizers admit not everything is ready yet.
I cannot use the internet, and so hot water is dirty. But I hope so. Improvements.
But in the lead up to the games, plumbing has been the least of the criticism for host Russia. Its human rights record and a recent anti-gay propaganda law have been frequent targets for activists. At a reception in Sochi, Olympic officials struck back at critics they say are trying to score political points at Russia's expense.
Have the courage to address your disagreements in a peaceful, direct political dialogue and not on the backs of the athletes.
Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, let me declare the 126th session of the International Olympic Committee open. Thank you.
Vladimir Putin has staked his country's reputation and his political and personal prestige on these games by showing how far Russia has come since the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. A bombing, suicide attack, or hostage crisis would seriously threaten those ambitions. Russia has responded by building a ring of steel around the Olympics to make the games safe for the 6,000 athletes and several 100,000 spectators. Thousands of security personnel are on high alert in and around the city. Security concerns grew after suicide bombers killed 34 people in nearby Volgograd in late December. Adding to those worries, the Austrian Olympic Committee has received kidnapping threats against 2 of its athletes. It doesn't regard the threats as acute, but an investigation is underway. The Sochi Winter Games, which are proving to be an irresistible platform for causes, open on Friday. James Aiken, TVB News.
Britain secretly helped India plan a deadly assault on Sikh separatists holed up in the Golden Temple in Amritsar back in 1984. That from Foreign Secretary William Hague, who insists because London's influence was limited, there is no need to apologize. Prime Minister David Cameron ordered a review of the matter after official papers suggested then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher sent an officer from the elite Special Air Service to advise India on the raid. The storming of the Golden Temple, aimed at flushing out Sikh separatists who demanded an independent homeland, triggered the subsequent assassination of then Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi.
New round of family reunions involving families separated by the 1950 to 53 Korean War will be held at the end of the month. The reunions will be the first in more than 3 years. North and South Korea reached agreement during talks at Panmunjom today. According to the South Korean Unification Ministry, the family reunions will take place from the 20th to the 25th of the month at Mount Kumgang in the north. The event is likely to coincide with the start of annual military drills between the United States and South Korea. Pyongyang is against the war games, which Seoul and Washington say are defensive in nature.
And still ahead in our newscast, a warning about a rapid increase in cancer cases worldwide. 4 South Asian men jailed for attacking the late tycoon Nina Wang's nephew. And a survey shows many local marathon participants lack adequate training.